This is Techno, a show about innovations that can change lives. We're going to explore the intersection of hardware and humanity, and we're doing it in a unique way. This is a show about science by scientists. Let's check out our team of hardcore nerds. Cara Santa Maria is a science journalist and educator with a background in neurobiology. Tonight, meet Troy, the dog who may have saved his master's life.
He keeps nuzzling up against me, and I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Can Troy and other canines detect cancer? Now researchers put them to the test under laboratory conditions.
Dogs can identify any kind of cancer sample.
Dr. Shinny Somara is a mechanical engineer. Tonight, can doctors save lives by bringing them into suspended animation? Dr. Crystal Dilworth is a molecular neuroscientist. And I'm Phil Torres, I'm an entomologist. That's our team, now let's do some science. Hey guys, welcome to TechKnow. I'm Phil Torres, and joining me today are Cara Santa Maria, Dr. Shinny Somara, and Dr. Crystal Dilworth. Now, I'm very excited for today's episode, guys, because it heavily involves one of the best animals out there, man's best friend, the dog. And Cara, you got to go play with a bunch of dogs that we know dogs make us happy, but they can also potentially make us healthy.
Yeah, so there is evidence to show that dogs can actually detect cancer. And I got to visit some laboratories, some training facilities, and even meet a woman whose dog detected her breast cancer. Let's check it out. Three-year-old grand champion, rain dance Led Zeppelin of Marquis, or just plain Troy as his family calls him, is a purebred Doberman show dog. But to his owner, Diane Papazian, he has an even greater distinction.
Definitely credit him with saving my life. There's no question about it.
Diane's family has a history of breast cancer, so she'd been diligent about getting mammograms. In fact, she'd just been given a clean bill of health a few months before when Troy, then a puppy, started acting strangely.
He's nuzzling up against my left side the whole time, and he's nuzzling and nuzzling, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I start to scratch because I'm highly allergic to his dander, and that's when I found the lump. So he was trying to tell me something. He clearly smelled or sensed or whatever he did, but he knew something was not right, and that's what got me to feel the lump.
Diane had a double mastectomy. She's healthy and cancer-free now.
God only knows what it could have been had it not been, had he not detected it.
A Ballard woman who detected breast cancer in her dog had the favor returned.
There are countless media reports from local news stations, ranging from King 5 in Washington, WSIL in Illinois, NBC 11 in Georgia. So many, in fact, researchers around the world have spent considerable time and money figuring out why dogs are such super sniffers.
A bloodhound has 300 million scent receptors in his nose. A human has 5. Also, the part of the dog's brain that analyzes those scent receptors is 40% larger than that of a human brain. When you look at a dog, the nose is half his face.
Another advantage? While humans use the same airway to smell and breathe, when air enters a dog's nose, it splits into 2 paths. One for olfaction, the other for respiration. Breathing and smelling become 2 separate functions. So dogs can actually filter scents to a degree humans can't begin to comprehend. Author and dog cognition researcher Alexandra Horowitz breaks it down this way in her book, Inside of a Dog. While humans may be able to detect a teaspoon of sugar in a cup of coffee, dogs can smell that same teaspoon of sugar in 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools. In West Hills, California, the In Situ Foundation is screening and training dogs to detect cancer. Master trainer Dina Zafiris is actually choosing these dogs based on their breed, but even more importantly, their personality.
Over. Good. Get out. Go weave. Get it. Get it, 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 get it. Phew.
So it's not so much about having a good nose, it's more about having kind of the tenacity and the stamina?
Yes, it's a trainability It's the willingness to want to repeat over and over again, wanting to do the same thing over and over again in a small room. So, and other dogs will become bored by it.
Using a scent rack, Dina begins training dogs with something they each show considerable interest in, like a ball.
So the ball may be hidden deep in the box, or eventually the cancer. He can't get to his toy, so he has to learn now to tell us. And just going up and down and sniffing and then waiting at the one that's the right box, that's not good enough. Now we train him to sit or lie down or paw or bark at the correct sample. So now you're training what's called your alert.
Eventually, once the dog can detect where the ball is hidden, Dina introduces breath samples from actual cancer patients. That's right, researchers here and in Germany are testing dogs' ability to smell cancer from a person's breath, a much less invasive method for patients.
Once you have your cancer samples, it's very, very important to understand how many samples you need, how to rotate these samples throughout time, how to use old samples to help the dog build confidence, but then introduce a new one. There is a formula that I developed. It's about 371 specific steps.
Having participated in 2 federally funded scent detection studies, Dina's anxious to continue sharing all she's learned and is still learning about man and woman's best friend.
So where do dog trainers like yourself fit into this big picture of diagnosing and treating cancer?
I think that dog trainers and doctors and scientists, we're like a little pyramid here. We need to help each other. I think that if we can all get together, I see myself as the bridge. I want to bring us together to help each other to start saving lives now.
That's a good girl. That is a very good girl.
Kara, you just told us an incredible fact, which is that dogs can actually sniff out and detect cancer.
It's true.
That's pretty incredible. And what doctors are doing with that information is even more incredible.
It's true. You know, dogs can smell cancer reliably, but we still don't know what it is in cancer that they're smelling. Once we can figure that out, scientists should be able to create an electronic nose that'll have widespread applications. Check it out.
They make up almost half a dog's face for a reason. The nose is a dog's most valuable tool. Now researchers and scientists at the University of Pennsylvania are trying to replicate it. Their goal is to create the earliest cancer detection system possible, particularly for the harder to diagnose types, like ovarian cancer.
Have you noticed that dogs can identify any kind of cancer sample, or is there something very specific to ovarian cancer?
There are studies out there that have shown dogs to be very effective at a variety of cancers, but can one dog detect all of them? Is there a universal cancer odor? Probably not. And so what we're trying to do is focus on individual cancers and find out what that is. I suspect that we probably will always have individual tests for different cancers.
The Working Dog Center at Penn School of Veterinary Medicine has been training dogs in scent detection since founder, Dr. Cynthia Otto, treated search and rescue canines during 9/11. Now the WDC is training Olin, Tsunami, and McBain to sniff out cancer cells in tissue and most recently blood. The samples are donated by cancer patients.
This jar has the malignant cancer plasma, which is going into arm 10. So now I'm just gonna go get Olin, and we'll be back, and we'll run Olin on the wheel.
Great, can't wait.
Absolutely.
He's ready to work.
He loves this game. Ready? With me? Wait. Seek. Yes, good boy. What a good boy. So it is in 10, as he indicated.
These dogs are all given to the center by breeders. Most come from a long lineage of working dogs. Although a big part of the center's job is to determine what kind of detection best suits each individual canine, only certain personalities enjoy cancer research.
So this is McBain,
This is McBain.
and McBain likes balls, not treats.
He likes both, but he works really well for the balls.
So he's got a different reward, and it's really just based on his personality.
Yes. You ready, bud? You ready? Go seek. Yes, good job. Good job, bud. Good job.
When it comes to cancer detection,
We've heard anecdotes of individuals having their cancer detected by their pets. Is the next step in that story training dogs to detect cancer?
I think that we have to look at it in a little bit of a different way. The pets that have detected cancer gave us the understanding that dogs have the ability, but there will never, in our experience, be a time where we have dogs walking through waiting rooms detecting cancer in people. And what we're working with here is the ability to find out what it is they're detecting, to isolate what those chemicals are.
Dr. Cynthia Otto's work is part of a unique collaboration that's underway here at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, she takes her data and sends it to a top chemist who's attempting to isolate and identify the unique compounds that are present in a cancer patient that a dog can already smell. Now, that information is used by one of the university's most renowned physicists to attempt to develop a nanosensor that can mimic a dog's nose. Dr. A.T. Charlie Johnson is in charge of building and programming that e-nose.
There are molecules floating in the air, which is what the dog is going to smell. They come from whatever he's smelling. The dog draws those molecules into his nose, and those molecules interact with cells inside the dog's nose, and those cells are different types of sensors. And the dog has, I think it's more than 1,000 different types of sensors. People only have 350.
The e-nose will be made up of nanosensors. From a storage tank, odorous compounds, potentially cancerous, will be lightly applied over the sensor for detection and analysis.
Then we would like to take all the information from those nanosensors out simultaneously and process it using a computer, not a dog's brain, but in fact a computer. And that's the trajectory that we're on, to try to produce an artificial system that could ideally be as good as the dog.
But before any of that can be done, scientists have to identify exactly what the odorants are that dogs seem to so easily detect in cancer cells. It makes me wonder, how can you possibly make a sensor for a compound that you haven't yet identified?
We've already shown that it can detect compounds that people are incapable of detecting. We've looked at mixtures of compounds. So this is very interesting, and we obviously dogs can do this, right? It's possible because dogs do it.
Dr. Otto says the university is 2 to 5 years away from experimentally diagnosing patients in clinical trials, but she has no doubt her dogs will get there. In the meantime, our most loyal companions continue to awe us, both in and outside the lab.
I think dogs have always saved our lives, and I think we're just now recognizing the many ways that they can do that. I just have no limit to what they can do to make our lives richer.
Now, I'll be the first to admit, when I first heard this anecdote about a dog detecting someone's breast cancer, I was pretty skeptical because there's a lot of anecdotes out there like that, and that's not data. But what you found out blew my mind.
Yeah. You know, the scientists are working around the clock to continue to collect data so that they can finally publish and say that this is consistent, reliable, valid, and people will be able to use that information.
And is there any breed of dog that can detect cancer, or is it a specific breed?
That's a really good question. You know, I always thought that the best dogs to train were golden retrievers, and what are some other good training dogs you think of?
German Shepherds,
breeds that were used in hunting? Exactly, but the truth is that apparently any dog can be trained to detect.
So in the case of actually finding the cancer, are they just more obsessed about getting their reward at the end of it?
That's exactly right. A dog doesn't care if it's smelling cancer or non-cancer. If it's so deeply trained into them that every time they find cancer, they get to play, they know that's a game, they want to play. Every time they see non-cancer, they don't get that reward, they're going to want to find that cancer.
But Kara, how are they applying this knowledge? Are we training dogs to work in hospitals?
You know, it's funny, you would think that that would be the next step, but the trainers and the scientists all agreed they don't want to bring dogs into hospitals. They want to keep dogs in a more sterile kind of laboratory environment so that samples can be collected, sent to the dogs for detection, and then sent back to the patients or the doctors for analysis.
And one of the other things I love about dogs, besides the fact that they can apparently detect cancer, is that they're pretty adorable. And you guys took some pictures while you were out there shooting.
I remember him. Now, I'll tell you, I don't think that this camera has cancer. I think the dog was just really excited to see
Just
us.
really excited to see you guys. I'd be excited to see you guys out there too. And if you want to check out more of our images from the field, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Tumblr. Well, Kara, I absolutely love the piece. My only request, and I think you guys agree, is next time you work with these dogs, bring one here for us to play with.
Oh, for sure.
All right. Now, guys, doctors have always been astounded by these cases in which somebody could have fallen into a frozen lake, the heart could have completely stopped, yet they can be fully revived. They're now taking that lesson and applying it to the emergency room in a pretty incredible way. So let's take a look. It's the gunshot treatment heard around the world. As part of a new study, doctors at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center are now working with shooting or stabbing victims using a revolutionary procedure that almost freezes patients in order to save them. Suspended animation, seen mostly in science fiction films, is getting closer to reality. The entire body cooldown process takes 15 minutes, during which time the patient is virtually lifeless. Emergency preservation and resuscitation is a non-sci-fi term for this procedure, and here's how it works. Doctors remove the patient's blood fast and replace the fluid with a cooling saline solution that halts almost all cellular activity, chilling them to almost 50 degrees below body temperature. So these doctors have already tried this out on pigs. As you guys saw, they've been working on the dummies that look like humans. But now they're waiting for that first bit of human data. And I'm really excited to see if this could potentially save somebody's life. Now, Shinny, you got the opportunity to actually talk to the doctor. What did you find out?
Yeah, I spoke to Dr. Tischerman, who's the lead researcher at the University of Pittsburgh. And I wanted to ask him a few questions about the whole concept, because they've known about this science for decades. But only now are they starting to test it on humans and really, hone in on the details of this procedure.
Why do you think that they've waited so long?
I think it's an exact science. You are essentially slowing the metabolism down, and how you actually do that needs to be determined by testing it on humans, because it's proven successful on animals so far.
I think the way that they're doing the trial is really interesting. Anyone affected by, gunshot wounds in a certain area is going to be treated with this technique as a last resort, and I think that that's really exciting, but I wonder about the opportunity to opt out. What if I'm suspicious of this technique and I don't want it used on me?
Well, all the people that are involved in the clinical trials are legally dead, so they're suffering from a cardiac arrest anyway.
One of the things I kept thinking of when I was watching this is these doctors have also looked to nature, because so many times in nature you see animals that can actually freeze down, animals that can tolerate being really cold, and I know there's some of these researchers that are looking at what compounds are in those animals' bloods. I know frogs do it pretty often, and it's pretty amazing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can pull from nature and then apply that to the situation.
That would be interesting.
There's definitely challenges to freezing a cell, right? The high water content in cells causes big problems. Ice crystals puncture cell walls, cells die, and so we have to find other ways, other technologies to get over this problem.
I do think with their animal testing, they've had pretty good success with things coming back, and yeah, it can be a bit trickier to determine brain function in something like a mouse compared to a human, but I mean, they're resuscitating people anyways who may have been brain dead for a minute, and in that minute, a lot of damage can be done. So what they're trying to do here is basically minimize that damage by cooling down the cells in the brain so they don't need that oxygen that otherwise would.
I think it's really important to note that this is not about freezing cells in the body. That's cryonics. This is a very, very different procedure. This is about slowing down the metabolism and allowing doctors to actually buy themselves time so that they can really work on the injuries that caused this hemorrhaging in the first place. Because 40% of cases that go into A&E actually die because of blood loss, not about the actual injuries in the first place.
Now, Shinny, you were mentioning that they didn't like the term suspended animation. What do they prefer to call it?
Yeah, I specifically asked Dr. Tischerman, why don't you like this media coined term of suspended animation? And he said it's because it actually doesn't express the urgency of this procedure. This is about emergency resuscitation, buying yourself time to be able to work on the human body, whereas suspended animation kind of suggests this kind of, infinite amount of time of being in the state, which is more like hibernation than it is in, creating 45 minutes to allow surgeons to actually work on the injuries.
And I'm sure when it comes to an emergency situation, 15 minutes, 45 minutes can be complete difference between life and death.
Oh, for
or
sure. Right
brain
now,
damage and not.
1 minute, 5 minutes is the difference between life and death. If that could be extended to 45 minutes, think about all of the procedures that they would be able to complete.
Yeah, I was reading that in 1 minute of having a stroke, you can lose 2 million brain cells. So this is kind of comparable to that. If they can control how much damage is being done, cut that down to just 5 minutes, that can be a huge change.
Shinny, how far away are we from knowing whether or not this is actually going to help us in human treatments?
I think this is about the clinical trials are about really learning how this is going to work on the human body. Because cells, when they do not receive oxygen, start to degenerate. And this procedure is about slowing down the cell's need for oxygen. And that's a very exact science. So they need to determine how much of the saline solution to put into the body, over what course of time, how to then bring the body back to life. I mean, there are so many things they need to learn. And yes, they've been successful on animals, but human beings are an entirely different organism.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more research to do. So with cryogenics, they're actually thinking of bringing back human beings by maybe 2045. But this procedure is a lot more established than that. This is about getting the science exactly right, whereas cryogenics is, I think it's a bit way out there.
Yeah, I think there's quite a gradient of how much you cool down the body to be able to resuscitate it, and I think this is a happy medium that should be able to be applied to real-world situations in everyday emergency rooms.
That was actually another point I discussed with Dr. Tischerman. Can there actually be a temperature that's too cold for this procedure? And he said yes. Getting the temperature just right is really important. You don't want to freeze cells because the minute you do, then, as you said, you get into that ice crystal situation and, our cells are mostly made up of water. You freeze that and you completely change the cell composition in the body, and that can be really dangerous. So, it's that really fine line of getting it right.
I think it'll be pretty amazing to see where it can actually go. If this becomes standard in even 10, 20 years, where if you go in and you're bleeding out, they just cool down your body so no damage is being done. They sew you right up, put the warm blood back in, and off you go. I mean, obviously it's not that simple, but it could get there.
It's pretty crazy because to the outside, it will seem like, a modern-day miracle.
I think it's a really exciting innovation because it could be the start of human preservation. And yes, that's very sci-fi, but, it's not entirely impossible.
It's hard to look at a story like this and not think about cryonics or cryogenics of, can we freeze down our bodies completely and come back in 20 years?
Well, we can freeze, no problem. I think it's the reanimating that we have a difficulty with right now.
At this point, you'd do better to save some tissue and then clone yourself from the DNA.
Perhaps, yeah.
Well, another absolutely fascinating episode, you guys. From dogs that can actually sniff out cancer to cooling down the human body and reanimating it in the emergency room. Can't wait to see what you guys come up next week here on TechKnow.
Dive deep into these stories and go behind the scenes at aljazeera.com/techknow. Follow our expert contributors on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and more.